Empty your workspace before today ends, Holly. The HR department will process your departure documentation. The text on my monitor became fuzzy as I reread it once more. Following 5 years of loyal commitment to Summit Edge Logistics, I received nothing but a harsh, detached message via email. 3 days. That was the duration I needed to lay my father to rest. 3 days of sanctioned grief leave. We require employees who put their job first, the message went on, treating my father's funeral like some voluntary social gathering I'd selected instead of completing quarterly documentation. I leaned backward in my seat, hearing the leather creak in the quiet of the early hours. The Boise workplace remained largely vacant, with the sky beyond just starting to glow with sunrise. I had arrived before usual hours, anxious to resume work following my short time away. I am Holly Peterson, and approximately 2 minutes prior, I served as the regional team supervisor of the most successful department at Summit Edge Logistics. At 34 years old, I had constructed more than just a profession. I had formed a group that resembled a family unit. We marked special occasions together, provided assistance during challenging periods, and motivated each other toward professional excellence. I gazed around my work area, the small succulent my colleagues had presented me during the previous holiday season, the picture frame containing our group photo from the corporate retreat, the personal notes of appreciation from team members I had guided. 5 years of my existence summarized into a few personal belongings that could be contained in a shipping box. The dismissal document included with the email bore Dan Weaver's signature, my immediate superior who had personally authorized my bereavement time off just the previous week. The notice cited inability to sustain sufficient attendance during essential operational timeframes. Apparently, my father's passing occurred during one of these vague, critical periods. I refrained from weeping. I didn't strike my desk or march into Dan's office seeking answers. Instead, I retrieved my mobile device and captured an image of the email, then sent it to my personal email account. Next, I powered down my workstation, rose from my chair, and began systematically collecting my belongings. When other staff members began arriving, my workspace was halfway emptied. Tanya from the accounting department noticed first. "Holly, what's occurring?" she inquired, her eyes growing wide upon seeing my container. "I've been dismissed," I responded matter-of-factly. "What? For what reason?" Evidently, taking sanctioned grief leave to inter my father didn't demonstrate appropriate work commitment. Tanya's expression shifted from bewilderment to indignation. "That's not correct. Have you spoken with Paula? The regional supervisor should be informed about this." "No," I stated, carefully protecting my succulent with newspaper. "I won't contest it, though I won't overlook it either. When you collaborate closely with individuals for years, you develop the ability to interpret their facial expressions." As I continued gathering items, additional team members arrived. Jason was the first of my subordinates to learn the information, his typical cheerful expression disappearing immediately. "This is nonsense," he began, but I stopped him with a slight head movement. "It's finished, Jason. Dan has made his choice. But we recently completed the Newbrook acquisition last month. Revenue increased by 18% this quarter due to your strategic planning." I smiled with sadness. Apparently, that wasn't sufficient. By 9:30, all 7 of my primary team members had assembled around my workspace in wordless support. Ethan, our logistics expert who seldom displayed feelings, appeared ready to strike a wall. Veronica, our client relationship supervisor, was openly weeping. Behind them stood Michael, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla, each displaying expressions ranging from shock to anger. "You cannot depart," Veronica declared. "The Wilson account renewal occurs next week. The Hernandez shipping agreement is under negotiation. None of us understands the procedures like you do." I completed sealing my container. Dan should have considered that before dismissing me for attending my father's burial service. The weight of my statement lingered in the atmosphere. My father had passed just 1 week earlier. The burial ground still held fresh soil. And now this betrayal from an organization I had devoted my heart to. I require everyone to return to their workstations, came a stern voice from behind us. Dan Weaver stood there with crossed arms, his narrow face displaying a disapproving expression. We have time constraints to fulfill. Nobody moved. Immediately, he added, his voice slightly elevated. After an extended moment, my team scattered, each offering me a significant glance as they returned to their work areas. Dan approached me, speaking quietly. This situation could have been managed with greater discretion if you had waited until day's end to collect your belongings. I maintained steady eye contact, similar to the discretion you demonstrated in dismissing me through email after authorizing my bereavement time. His jaw became rigid. Business requirements shift quickly. Summit Edge requires individuals who comprehend that priorities change. Your father's death was regrettable, but don't, I cautioned, my voice dangerously low. Don't complete that statement, Dan. Momentarily, something resembling doubt crossed his features. Then he straightened, adjusting his necktie. Human resources awaits you. Please don't complicate this situation unnecessarily. I lifted my container. Don't worry, I won't create a disturbance. But remember this instant, Dan. You might discover its significance later. The Human Resources office felt sterile. White surfaces, sparse decoration, and Barbara Kent's compassionate yet rehearsed demeanor. She had recently joined the organization just 6 months prior, and I could observe her discomfort with the circumstances. I apologize about this situation, Holly, she stated, sliding separation documents across her workspace. And I deeply regret your father's passing. Thank you, I responded, examining the paperwork. Standard severance package, 2 weeks compensation, a non-disparagement provision. A reminder of my non-competition contract preventing me from employment with direct rivals for 6 months. Is there information I should understand regarding why this occurred? Barbara inquired cautiously. This appears sudden. I considered how much to reveal, then chose honesty. I displayed the email on my phone. 3 days of approved bereavement time and I'm dismissed for insufficient work prioritization. Barbara's professional composure faltered, her eyes widening. This represents the actual dismissal notice. Simply an email. No performance enhancement plan. No recorded warnings. No nothing. She frowned, noting something on her legal pad. I must verify certain matters with the legal department. Would you excuse me briefly? While Barbara stepped away, I looked through the window. From this level, I could observe the Boise River winding through the city. My father had enjoyed fishing that waterway. He had taught me patience there, standing in waders as the current flowed around our legs. The river flows, Holly girl, he would say. But the stones remain firm. Be like the stones. Barbara returned 20 minutes later, her expression carefully neutral, though her tight smile revealed everything. Nothing would be altered. Regrettably, Idaho operates under at-will employment, she began. The organization maintains the authority to. I understand, I interrupted, signing the documents without additional discussion. Summit Edge can act as it chooses, just as I can. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. Off the record, this isn't appropriate. If you wish to pursue legal action. I don't, I stated firmly. But I appreciate your sentiment. As I walked through the main office toward the departure, I sensed eyes following me. My team observed silently, their expressions solemn. I offered them a small smile, my final gesture as their supervisor. Outside, the September atmosphere was unexpectedly mild. I placed my container in my car's trunk and sat in the driver's position, allowing myself a moment to process everything. My phone chimed with a text message. Then another and another. Jason. This is wrong. What action can we take? Veronica. Are you well? Can we meet later? Ethan. Dan's a cowardly fool. The team is enraged. Additional messages arrived, expressions of outrage, support, and loyalty. These individuals weren't merely co-workers. They were my professional family. I started my vehicle, a strategy already developing in my thoughts. I wouldn't confront Summit Edge directly. I wouldn't file a lawsuit, though I likely had valid grounds. No, I would be tactical and patient, as my father had instructed me. The stones remain firm while the river flows past. My phone rang. It was Hank Fleming, the CEO of Vertex Transport Systems, Summit Edge's largest competitor. We had met at an industry conference the previous year and maintained contact. He had been attempting to recruit me for months. It was time to return his communication. The Vertex Transport Systems office represented everything Summit Edge was not: open design, collaborative work areas, and large windows displaying the Boise cityscape. Hank Fleming, a substantial man with a silver beard and sharp eyes, welcomed me with a strong handshake. "I've been hoping you would contact me," he said, leading me to a meeting room. "Though I confess I didn't anticipate it would be under these conditions." Information moved quickly in our field. Hank already knew about my dismissal, though not the specifics. I provided him with the details as we sat down, showing him Dan's email. "That's not merely poor management," Hank said, frowning. "That's cruel. Bereavement leave exists for legitimate reasons. Summit Edge has consistently prioritized profits above people," I replied. "I simply never expected to experience it firsthand." Hank leaned forward. "I'll be direct, Holly. I want you on my staff. Vertex is expanding our Pacific Northwest operations, and we require someone with your knowledge. The division director role is yours if you desire it." My pulse quickened. Division director. A substantial advancement from my position at Summit Edge. Greater responsibility, increased authority, improved compensation. "What about my non-competition agreement?" "Yes." Hank smiled. "Our legal team has examined it. It's excessively restrictive and likely unenforceable. Additionally, we would cover any legal costs if Summit Edge attempted to enforce it." "I would need time to consider it," I said cautiously. "Certainly," Hank replied. "Take the weekend. We can discuss specifics on Monday." That evening, I met Veronica and Jason at Riverfront Brewing, a small establishment away from downtown where we wouldn't likely encounter other Summit Edge employees. They arrived together, their expressions mixing anger and concern. "How are you managing?" Veronica asked, settling into the booth. "I'm fine," I assured them. "It's been a difficult couple of weeks, but I'll recover." Jason snorted. "Dan's an idiot. The office is already in disorder. Nobody knows where the Henderson proposal documents are kept, and the system access you possessed hasn't been transferred to anyone else." "That seems like Dan's problem," I replied, sipping my beverage. Veronica leaned forward. "It's more extensive than that. Everyone's discussing it, not just our team. People are angry about how you were treated." I hadn't really anticipated that reaction. "You were respected, Holly," Jason said. "Not only by us. The way Dan handled this situation, people are frightened now. If they would do this to you, their top team supervisor, what would they do to anyone else?" Veronica nodded. "Paula has been asking questions. The regional manager appears concerned." "Good," I said simply. As we conversed, more texts arrived from other team members, similar accounts of disorganization, frustration, and anger toward management. Summit Edge was already feeling my absence. "What will you do now?" Jason asked. I hesitated. "I've received an offer from Vertex." Their eyes widened. "But my non-competition agreement. Those aren't always enforceable," Veronica said quickly. She worked with contracts daily and understood the legalities, especially if they dismissed you without cause. That's what Vertex's legal team indicated. "But it's still a risk." Jason's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. "Dan's scheduling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, Saturday. He's never done that before. The Wilson account review is due Monday," Veronica explained to me. "Nobody can locate your analysis documents." I smiled slightly. Those files were properly saved on the company server, But my particular organizational method wasn't immediately apparent to others. I hadn't expected this would become a problem, but I couldn't deny feeling a small sense of satisfaction. I should leave, I said, gathering my purse. Early appointment tomorrow. As I stood to depart, Jason caught my attention. Holly, if you did join Vertex, hypothetically speaking, would they be recruiting? Paused, studying their faces. Hypothetically, yes. They're expanding quickly. The look that passed between Jason and Veronica told me everything I needed to know. Saturday morning I met with Vincent Torres, an employment attorney recommended by a friend. His office was compact but refined, with diplomas from prestigious institutions decorating the walls. I explained my situation, showing him the email and dismissal notice. This represents clear wrongful termination, Vincent said, removing his glasses. Dismissing someone for taking approved bereavement leave could be argued as both a contract breach and a violation of good faith. I'm not interested in litigation, I clarified. I simply want to understand my options regarding my non-competition agreement. Vincent examined the document carefully. This is excessively restrictive. 6 months prohibition on working for competitors within a 300-mile radius. That's essentially requiring you to leave the industry or relocate. Is it enforceable? Yes. In Idaho, it's questionable, especially given the circumstances of your termination. Courts typically won't enforce non-competitions when the employer acts in bad faith. He leaned back in his chair. What's your plan, Holly? Vertex Transport Systems has offered me a position. Better title, improved pay. Vincent nodded. Summit Edge would need to prove that you're causing them actual damage by working there. Given that they terminated you, that's a difficult argument to make. He wrote some notes. I'd suggest proceeding cautiously, but don't let this non-competition prevent you from earning a living. Over the weekend, my phone continued buzzing with messages from my former team. The emergency Saturday meeting had apparently been tense. Dan was pressuring everyone to assume additional responsibilities to cover my absence with no extra compensation. The Wilson account files had been located, but nobody fully comprehended my analysis methodology. By Sunday evening I had reached my decision. Monday morning I called Hank Fleming. I accept your offer, I told him. But I have one condition. Name it, Hank replied. I want to build my own team. If my former colleagues from Summit Edge apply to Vertex, I want them to receive fair consideration. Absolutely, Hank agreed. If they're half as talented as you, we'd be fortunate to have them. That afternoon I signed my contract with Vertex, Division Director of Pacific Northwest Operations. The salary was 40% higher than what I'd been earning at Summit Edge, with better benefits and a signing bonus. As I left Vertex's offices, I checked my phone to find 7 new messages, one from each core member of my former team. They all wanted to meet for coffee privately. Tuesday morning, I sat at a quiet corner table in a small coffee shop downtown, waiting. Jason arrived first, then Veronica. One by one, Ethan, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla joined us until we filled 2 tables pushed together. Summit Edge is collapsing, Ethan said without preamble. Dan's micromanaging everyone. Paula is pressuring him, and clients are asking questions. The Wilson account is threatening to withdraw, Veronica added. They wanted to know why you weren't managing their renewal. I sipped my coffee, listening as each shared similar stories of chaos and frustration. We heard you've accepted a position at Vertex, Jason finally said. The others grew quiet, watching me intently. News travels fast, I observed. We want to join you, Veronica stated firmly. The others nodded in agreement. I studied their faces. You all have good positions at Summit Edge. Secure employment. Are you certain you want to risk that? What security? Louise asked bitterly. If they'd fire you for attending your father's funeral, none of us are safe. Vertex is hiring, I said carefully. I can't promise anything, but I can provide references. Each of you would need to apply formally. We already have, Gabriella revealed, producing printed copies of confirmation emails. All 7 of us, yesterday. I couldn't conceal my surprise. You applied before speaking with me? We trust you, Holly, Kayla said simply. Where you go, we go. I felt a wave of emotion, gratitude mixed with vindication. Let me make some phone calls. The following Monday, my phone rang at 7:30 a.m. The caller ID showed Paula McCormick, Summit Edge's regional manager. Holly. Paula's voice had forced composure. We need to talk. Good morning, Paula, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What can I do for you? I've just received 7 resignation letters, all from your former team, all effective immediately. There was a pause. Care to explain? I took a slow breath. I'm not sure what explanation you're seeking. I don't work for Summit Edge anymore. They're all going to Vertex, where you just started as division director. Her voice hardened. This doesn't appear coincidental. People make career choices for various reasons, Paula. Perhaps you should ask Dan why your top-performing team is leaving en masse. This is about your termination, isn't it? She sounded resigned now. I've reviewed the situation. Dan didn't consult me before letting you go. I never would have approved it. That's between you and Dan, I replied. Though I'm curious why Summit Edge's regional manager wasn't involved in terminating a team lead. Paula sighed. Dan claimed it was an urgent performance issue that couldn't wait for my return from the Seattle conference. I trusted his judgment. Clearly that was an error. I said nothing, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. Look, Holly, Paula finally continued. I'm prepared to offer you your position back with a 10% raise and a formal apology. We need your expertise. The Wilson account is threatening to walk. I appreciate the offer, Paula, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. We'll match whatever they're paying plus 15%. It's not about the money. Then what would it take? There was desperation in her voice now. 7 key employees walking out simultaneously is devastating. The operational knowledge alone. It would take time travel, I interrupted. Going back to when my father died and Summit Edge showing basic human decency instead of punishing me for grieving. The line went quiet. I need to go, Paula. I start my new position today, and I don't want to be late. Your non-compete, she began. Feel free to have your legal team contact mine, I replied evenly. Though they might want to review the circumstances of my termination first. After hanging up, I drove to Vertex's offices, arriving early to prepare for the day. Hank met me in the lobby, beaming. We're considering all 7 of your former colleagues, he said. Their qualifications are impressive. Interviews start Wednesday. Thank you for giving them a fair chance, I replied. Fair chance, Holly. They're top talent. Summit Edge's mistake is our gain. 2 days later, I received another call, this time from Barbara Kent in Human Resources at Summit Edge. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said quietly. But Dan Weaver has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Paula is launching an investigation into management practices, particularly around bereavement and time-off policies. That's good to hear, I said genuinely. The board of directors is involved now, Barbara continued. Losing an entire specialized team to a competitor has triggered alarm bells. They're reviewing all terminations from the past year. By Friday, all 7 of my former team members had received and accepted offers from Vertex. We met for dinner to celebrate, raising glasses in a toast. To new beginnings, Veronica said. And to Holly, Jason added, who taught us what real leadership looks like. The following week, I received a formal letter from Summit Edge acknowledging my wrongful termination and offering a settlement to avoid litigation. I accepted it, not for the money, but for the official admission that they had been wrong. That same day, the Wilson account signed with Vertex, bringing their business to us after learning that their preferred team now worked under my direction. The river had moved, but we had remained steady like rocks, just as my father had taught me. 3 months later, I stood at the front of Vertex's largest conference room, presenting our quarterly results to the executive team. The numbers spoke for themselves. 30% growth in our division for major client acquisitions, 3 of them former Summit Edge accounts, and operational efficiency improvements that had reduced costs by 22%. Exceptional work, Holly, Hank said when I finished. You and your team have exceeded every projection. Smiled. My team deserves the credit. They've been remarkable. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find my 7 core team members waiting with a cake. What's this for? Asked. It's been exactly 3 months since we all jumped ship together, Jason explained. We're celebrating our Independence Day. I laughed. You're all ridiculous but happy. Seriously, Holly, Veronica added. Everyone's thriving here. It was true. Each team member had grown professionally in their new roles at Vertex. They had more autonomy, better resources, and were finally receiving recognition for their contributions. Most importantly, they were valued as people, not just productivity machines. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Summit Edge Logistics announces restructuring amid client exodus. I showed it to the group. I heard they lost the Hernandez contract last week, Ethan said, cutting cake slices. That's 20% of their Pacific Northwest revenue. Dan's gone, Louise added. Cleared out his office Friday. Paula is trying to save what's left, but I felt no pleasure in Summit Edge's struggles, only a sense of justice. The company wasn't failing because we had left. It was failing because its leadership had created a culture where employees were disposable, where attending a father's funeral was considered a lack of commitment. To Summit Edge, I raised my water glass. May they learn that a company is only as strong as how they treat their people. And to Holly, Gabriella added, who showed us we deserved better. 6 months after joining Vertex, I received an unexpected lunch invitation from Paula McCormick. She'd left Summit Edge and joined a management consulting firm specializing in organizational culture. We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Boise River. Paula looked different, more relaxed. The perpetual stress lines around her eyes had softened. Thank you for meeting me, she began. I wanted to apologize properly for what happened. You weren't directly responsible, I reminded her. No, but I created the environment that made it possible. She sighed. After you and your team left, everything unraveled. The board brought in external consultants to evaluate what went wrong. The report wasn't flattering to any of us in leadership. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. Summit Edge is being acquired by Meridian Shipping, Paula revealed, at a fraction of its previous valuation. They're basically buying the client list and physical assets. The news didn't surprise me. Summit Edge had been hemorrhaging clients and talent for months. What about Dan? Asked. Still unemployed last I heard. His reputation in the industry. She trailed off. Let's just say your story has circulated widely. I hadn't spread the details of my termination, but I hadn't hidden them either. When asked why I'd left Summit Edge, I told the simple truth. I've learned a valuable lesson from all this, Paula continued. Now I'm helping other companies avoid the same mistakes. As we finished lunch, Paula asked the question I sensed had been on her mind all along. Was it worth it, walking away quietly instead of fighting? I thought about my team at Vertex, thriving, motivated, and treated with respect. I thought about the clients who had followed us, who now received better service. I thought about my father, who had taught me that sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest. Yes, I replied simply. The results speak for themselves. 1 year after that fateful email that had changed the course of my career, Vertex named me Executive Vice President of Operations for the entire Northwest region. My division had become the company's crown jewel, efficient, innovative, and boasting the highest employee satisfaction scores in the organization. Each of my 7 team members had been promoted as well. Jason now led his own division. Veronica had transformed our client relations approach and earned recognition throughout the industry. The others had similarly distinguished themselves, their talents finally receiving the appreciation they deserved. On the anniversary of my termination from Summit Edge, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was my old cactus plant, now slightly larger but still thriving, with a note from Barbara Kent. Rescued this from your desk. Thought you might want it back. Summit Edge closes for good next week. I placed the cactus on my windowsill where it would get plenty of sunlight. Like me, it had survived being discarded and found a better place to grow. That evening, I drove to the Boise River and stood on the bank where my father and I used to fish. The water flowed steadily around the rocks, just as it always had. I thought about how a single moment, a cold email terminating my employment, had ultimately led to greater success and happiness, not just for me but for everyone who had followed me. You were right, Dad, I whispered to the river. Sometimes you need to stay steady and let the current do its work. As I looked back on my journey from terminated team lead to executive vice president, I realized my revenge hadn't been in destroying Summit Edge. My revenge had been in building something better. A workplace where bereavement leave wasn't viewed as a lack of commitment, where people were valued beyond their productivity metrics, where leadership meant empowering others rather than controlling them. The greatest revenge wasn't in tearing down what had hurt me, but in creating something that made the old system obsolete. My father would have been proud of that. Looking toward the future, I felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had brought me here, even the painful parts. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, if you remain as steady as the rocks while the river of change rushes past.